Well, good morning. How's everybody today? Well, that sounded real convincing. I'll ask one more time. How is everyone? That's better. That sounds more like it. My name's Max Kennedy. My wife is Jennifer. Would you stand, Jennifer, real quick? That's my wife. She's the one with hair in the relationship. And sitting next to her is my daughter, Kelly, and my grandson, Cooper. She lives in Rowlett. Give her a hand for coming over today. And my grandson. I have two other grandsons in your nursery. Hopefully you have a nursery when this is all over. But I have been here before, and I recognize some of you, and I hope some of you recognize me. I'm the bald missionary from Nicaragua. You know, missionaries, a lot of them are bald. But I got to thinking about that. I figured it out. God does not put marble tops on cheap furniture. And so there you go. But anyway, I'm so glad to be back with you. I'm glad to be able to share with you tonight more about the ministry and what God has done in our lives in these past 2 years. Jennifer and I are still rookie missionaries. We've been on the field for 2 years. We went to language school. We met the Robinsons down there in Costa Rica, developed a friendship with them, and it's really cool to be in a conference with them and her parents. So give them a round of applause too. Again, glad to have missionaries here. I love the theme of your conference, and I am honored to be able to start things off this morning. The whole idea of this theme is if not. If not. And that's a great question to ask yourself. If not, and especially today, what I want to talk to you about is the question, if not me, then who? Or if not me, who? You know, there's a lot of biblical examples that I could use, because there were moments in men and women's lives in the Bible that question came up. God wanted them to do something. He wanted to use them. And this question is, if I don't do it, then who? If I'm not willing to say yes, if I'm not willing to do something instead of nothing, then who will? And that is the question we're posing to you this morning when it comes to missions and the Great Commission. You think of the Bible characters like Noah. If he hadn't built the boat, then who? Abraham. God said, leave the land of your father and go to a place where I will show you. What if he had just said, send the next guy? Moses. I mean, good night. He had to deal with a lot of junk, leading a big group of Jewish people around in the wilderness and all that. If he didn't do it, who? David. Esther. I mean, there's just many, many examples. The Bible's full of examples of godly men and women who, when faced with the choice, decided to do something rather than nothing. Many people think God only uses people with a lot of talent, influence, well-spoken. God can use people like that and does, but most often, God uses normal people like you and me. Abraham Lincoln said, God must love average people because he made so many of them. I join that crowd. I must admit, when we talk about missions, and the reason we're here, folks, is something bigger than any one of us. What we're talking about is the fulfillment of the Great Commission, the commandment that Jesus left the church, his followers, to accomplish, which is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to every living human being on the globe. When we think of that and the large task, the enormity of this task, it's really hard for us to wrap our brains around what our individual part is in that. I must admit, when we look at the enormous task of taking the gospel around the globe to over 7 billion people, I don't feel like someone who could be a part of something that huge. I don't. I really have very little to offer. I'm just one person with very little ability and even less intelligence. The Great Commission just seems too big, too time-consuming, too costly for an average Joe or an average Max to be a part of, and certainly too big to accomplish on my own. And when I feel that overwhelmed, and maybe even you kind of sense that, how are we going to do it? I mean, we've got a church full of individuals here, and it's a good-sized group here, but how would even the people in this room accomplish the task we just talked about of taking the good news all around the world to 7 billion people. When I feel overwhelmed like that by the Great Commission and its fulfillment, I have to remind myself of what the disciples of Jesus must have felt like that day when the risen Jesus Christ gave them that commission for the very first time. Here's a group of Jewish men. Just think back with me for a minute. Put yourself in their shoes. A group of Jewish men whose lives had been revolutionized by the ministry of Jesus, no doubt. They were firsthand witnesses to his miracles, his crucifixion, his death, and now his resurrection. The last few days of their lives leading up to this great commission when Jesus gave it to them, the last few days of their lives had been a nightmare. And now the resurrected Jesus was standing before them with one great mandate to leave them until his return. Go into all the world and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Can't you just see them looking around at themselves thinking, is there someone else behind us? Is there a big old group of people that Jesus is talking to and they kind of look around at each other? Is he talking to us? Surely he doesn't expect us 11 uneducated group of average normal guys to accomplish that. I mean, they must have thought that in that moment. Did Jesus really, is he expecting us to do that? He did. He was looking right at them. If ever there was a time for them to question their talents, abilities, intelligence, and resources, that was the time. Now, we're not told how the disciples responded, but I bet they all took a big gulp, kind of, really? They may have even felt a little nauseous. I know there had to be some butterflies swarming in their stomachs. I can imagine the thoughts that rushed through their heads. How could Jesus be serious? He knows who we are. He knows where we came from. He knows we're prone to argue and fight among ourselves. And by the way, Jesus, not to disrespect you or anything, but that message that you want us to tell the whole world about, I mean, no disrespect, but Jesus, you just got crucified for that message. And now you're leaving something this important in our hands, this small group? And one more thing, Jesus, you are going to leave us like directions, a manual, like step-by-step instructions, right? I mean, just telling us to do something without really telling us how to do it, I'm not sure that's a wise move, Jesus. I mean, can't you imagine the thoughts? I don't know if that's what they thought, but I know that's what I would have thought. You see, all the Bible heroes that we think of as Bible heroes were not heroes to start with. Heroes are not born. Heroes are made. These men and all other Bible heroes, like I mentioned in the Old Testament, were just people, just like you and me. People, normal, average, sinners, procrastinators, worriers, doubters, weak. But the one good thing they all had in common was, when faced with the question, if not me, who? They decided to do something instead of nothing. I guess this is on. Maybe you can just change it for me. I'm pushing the button. There we go. Up, too far. There we go. So you have two options when faced with this question that I had just had up there, if not me, who? The two options is stay put or step out. That's it. Now, I will tell you, staying put is a whole lot easier. It ruffles no feathers. It won't cost you anything extra. You can, just go on with life as you have planned. That is a total option for you. In this week, as we talk about missions and your involvement in it as a church member here and how that you can actually be a part of reaching the world for Jesus Christ, listen, you don't have to do a thing. You can stay put. That is an option. You can say, well, I've done a few things in the past. I'm good with that. I'm not going to do anything else. Or you can choose who we call Bible heroes and who maybe you might have modern Bible heroes today, what they do, and that is step out. And so I want to talk to you about that part. If you choose to step out rather than stay put. If, to the question, if not me, who, you say, me, Lord, I will. I choose to step out instead of stay put. That's what I want to talk to you about. And you know what? One of the things that I want to start with is a story. This is the first time, I think, in my life as an adult that in terms of missions and doing something for missions, that question, if not me, who, really came into my life for the very first time. Jennifer and I pastored for 23 years before God called me to be a missionary. So I was a pastor here in the Metroplex, actually, in Saxe for 18 years. And during those last probably 8 years of my pastorate, we really got involved in taking missions trips. And we started by taking these crazy, extreme missionary adventures in Honduras, in Central America. That's kind of where I developed this love of being, doing hiking and missions and combining those things. We would hike to villages that had never been really reached before. They were only accessible by mule trails because the hurricanes had wiped out infrastructure back in the 80s. And it was really pretty cool adventures. Well, this one particular one, Jennifer was with me on this trip, and we trained. This was something that you actually had to physically train for because we were going to be hiking 11 miles through dense jungle, forest, up mountains, down mountains, across rivers, and blah, blah, blah. Well, we started this trip. We had 6 other people, so there was 8 of us, and then there was one leader from the organization we were going with, XMA, who went with us. And we were hiking. We'd been hiking pretty much half of a day. We were only about halfway there. And we came across a roaring river. Now, it had been raining on us all day. The mud was so thick, it just, we all grew 3 inches because of the mud on the bottom of our boots. It was one of those kind of days, sticky, slick, muddy, gross, wet, damp, the whole thing. We get to this river, and it's swollen, huge, and there is a bridge across the river that makes this one look like the Golden State Bridge, right? This one here is actually better that you're seeing. I don't have a picture of the one that we crossed. That was before iPhones. So I don't have a picture, but that bridge is similar. The boards went across, and it was about, about 90 yards long, this bridge, so almost a football field long. The river was running fast. We all got there, our mouths dropped, and we look around, and we start asking locals, is this the only way you can get across? Because where we were going, this village called La Jolla, was still another 5 miles away, and we had to hike past this bridge. They said, that's the only way across. Jennifer immediately looks at me and says, Max, I love you, but I am not crossing that bridge. I said, honey, I don't think really we have an option. We've come this far. We don't want to just turn around. She said, I'm not doing it. I said, well, hold on. Let's ask. We asked some questions, right? And again, only way across. Only way across the river was this Indiana Jones death bridge, right? So we got together as a group, and we kind of talked about it. The leader from XMA, he said, look, I'll go first and kind of test it out. So we all went to the edge of the bridge, and you kind of go up this muddy slope to get to it and then start across the bank here. He took 3 steps, and I'm not kidding you, he fell. He fell through the bridge. It cracked, broke, boom, he hit the muddy slope, started running towards or sliding towards the rushing water. We ran down, we picked him up, got him up, and Jennifer looks at me and goes, ain't happening. I said, honey, we have to. Now she begins to cry because she realizes, that we're all being pressed by this question, if not us, who, She begins to cry and say, Max, I just don't think I can do it. I said, honey, I don't want to either. And I'm holding back the tears, I don't want to go either. I said, but I think we really have to. So we decided we would take it slow. I would go with her. We went. She was right here on front of, and everybody went first. So we saw that some made it across. That gave her a little bit more of a boost. We got to our first couple of steps, and we see something out of the corner of our eye. There is a horse floating fast down the river, about that fast. Floating, swimming, drowning, I don't know, a horse. And that gets our attention. And then we hear, and we see a guy who had fallen off of the horse trying to cross the river, coming down the river too. And some guys went out and they tried to help him. He got to the edge and he got out and all he had on was his underwear. The water was so forceful it had ripped all of his clothes off. Thankfully, he still had his whitey-tighties, but that's the truth. Now I'm thinking, I don't want to cross this bridge. I don't want people finding the dead body of Max Kennedy in my whitey-tighties. You know what I'm saying? So I'm scared too. But we calmed down, we prayed, we walked, and we creaked. Some of the boards would slide. It would actually crack. We'd try to get over the cable part and hold on, and we made it all the way across. And we finally made it to La Jolla, showed the Jesus film. We saw dozens of people accept Christ. And you know what? We had to go back, though, and we had to cross that bridge again. But you know, it wasn't quite as hard the second time. Why? Because we had chosen at that question, if not me, who, to say, okay, I will, and we stepped out by faith the first time. Some of you this morning are at that position on your own bridge. I don't know what it is. I'm hoping you're thinking about missions, and I'm hoping that God may be calling some of you to be missionaries. Maybe some of you are thinking about giving to missions more than you've ever given. You're being challenged to do that, and that might be scary to you, just as scary as crossing a literal bridge. But we have to learn to step out. Now, how do we do it? Where's the motivation in stepping out? Well, let me show you. First of all, what stepping out means. Here's my definition. Step out means to take action, to risk personal security for the sake of others in danger. That's why God puts us in these positions, if not me, who? I know God's saying there are people who are in danger, they're going to die and go to hell, and I want you to be used. Will you do it? That's when we make the decision to stay put or step out. Why? Because we are taking action to risk our personal security for the sake of others that are in danger. Now, is that even a biblical concept? Well, I'm glad you asked. Check it out. I'm pushing the laser button instead of the change button. Look at this. Jude chapter 1, which is the only chapter, verses 22 and 23 say, "And of some have compassion, making the difference, and of others save with fear, pulling them out of the where? The where? How close do you have to get to a fire to pull someone out of it? Risk of being burned yourself, right? This is a biblical concept. There are times you can win people with compassion, your example, your lifestyle, but I tell you what, there are other positions that God will put you in where it takes a risk. It takes being willing to step out instead of stay put. Because it is a biblical concept. He says, save others with fire, hating even the garment spotted by the flesh. The greatest missionary example of all was also moved by this question, if not me, who? Check this out in his passage of Scripture in Corinthians 9. He says, this is Paul, I am made all things to all men that by all means I might save some. That was a risk for Paul. He was a Jew who converted to Christianity, who was an apostle now to the Gentiles, and so it was this mixed up kind of life, and when he acted like a Jew in front of Gentiles, they probably complained, and when he was a Gentile, his Jewish friends, or acted like Gentile to win the Gentiles, his Jewish friends probably were upset. This was a risky move. For you, it could be the same thing. You might have to step out of your comfort zone, take a personal risk in order to reach those who are in danger. That means sometimes you might have to hang out with people not just like you. Here is a church, you're in an area of the Metroplex that I know well, and there are people of all different types. The world has come to your doorstep. You need to be willing as a church to say what Paul said. So, taking a risk, is it biblical? It absolutely is. Only for the purpose of winning others who are in danger, putting my own self at risk. That's what happened at that bridge. That's why Jennifer and I went across. We chose to do something rather than nothing. We chose to step out rather than stay put. And staying put was an option. Jennifer actually said at one point, Max, she grew up in Bolivia. She's a missionary's kid. She said, Max, I speak Spanish. I'll sit here on this rock till you come back. I'm not kidding you. That's what she said. And I'm like, oh, that's an option. Yeah, I'll leave my wife in the middle of nowhere, Honduras, and maybe in 3 days she'll still be there. She considered that option of staying put. I did too. But praise the Lord, wisdom ruled, right? And we moved, and she went with me. But anyway,